Welcome to Camtoon, where incredible stories come to life. Journey with us to the vibrant village of Iked, where dreams, love, and destiny collide. Don't miss this epic tale of courage, resilience, and romance. The sun rose over the small village of Ikede, casting a golden glow over the rooftops of the mud houses and the lush green fields that surrounded them. The air buzzed with excitement. Today, Prince Emeka, the heir to the royal throne, was coming to visit. He was on a journey to find his future queen, and every eligible maiden in the village had been preparing for weeks. Bright wrappers were carefully ironed, beads were polished to perfection, and hair was styled in intricate patterns. But not everyone in the village was preparing to meet the prince. In a small corner of the village, Amina sat quietly, grinding millet for her stepmother, Madame Ngozi. Amina had always been treated as less than a daughter, a burden instead of a blessing. While her stepsisters giggled and fussed over their appearances, Madame Ngozi had other plans for Amina. She saw her as nothing more than a servant to meet her every demand. "Amina!" Madame Ngozi's sharp voice echoed through the house. "Why are you sitting there? Take the water pot and go to the stream. I need fresh water for cooking." Amina's heart sank. She knew what this meant. The stream was far, and fetching water would keep her away for hours. "But stepmother," Amina began, her voice trembling. "The prince is coming today. Can't I?" "You dare talk back to me?" Madame Ngozi snapped, her face darkening. "You think someone like you deserves to see the prince? Look at yourself. No royal blood would glance at a girl like you." Crushing the urge to argue, Amina tied her scarf tightly around her head, picked up the heavy pot, and started the long walk to the stream. As she trudged along the dusty path, she heard the lively chatter of other girls heading to the village square, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Her heart ached with longing, but she pushed the thought away. Life had never been fair to her, and she had learned not to hope for things beyond her reach. At the village square, Prince Emeka arrived amidst a grand procession. Drummers beat their instruments, and villagers danced in colorful swirls of joy. The prince, dressed in regal attire of gold and deep green, dismounted his horse with a quiet grace. His sharp features and confident aura made many maidens' hearts race. But despite the spectacle, his expression remained unreadable. He wasn't here for flattery, he sought authenticity, something rare and precious. Meanwhile, at the stream, Amina was kneeling by the water, filling her pot. The cool breeze and gentle rippling of the stream offered her a rare moment of peace. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching until they were almost upon her. "Hello there," a deep, smooth voice said. Startled, Amina looked up, and her eyes widened. Standing before her was Prince Emeka himself. She recognized him immediately from the stories she had heard. But why was he here? And why was he speaking to her? "My prince," she stammered, quickly bowing her head. "Forgive me, I didn't." "No need to apologize," Emeka interrupted gently, a small smile playing on his lips. "I saw you from the path and thought I'd say hello. Why are you out here alone?" Amina hesitated. Should she tell him the truth? That her stepmother had sent her away to keep her from meeting him? I came to fetch water," she finally said. "It's my duty." The prince studied her for a moment. There was something about her, an honesty, a simplicity, that he hadn't seen in the other girls who had thrown themselves at him in other villages. "What is your name?" he asked. "Amina," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amina," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "It suits you." Before Amina could respond, a loud commotion from the village square echoed through the air. Prince Emeka turned his head briefly but didn't seem in a hurry to leave. "Will you be at the square later?" he asked, his gaze returning to her. Amina's cheeks flushed, I don't think so, my prince. The village buzzed with stories of Prince Emeka's visit long after he had left the square. Women gossiped in the market, young men debated his character, and the maidens who had gathered to meet him recounted every glance and word with eager embellishment. But none of them knew about the prince's encounter at the stream. In the small compound where Amina lived, Madame Ngozi and her two daughters, Bola and Chinyer, were bursting with excitement. They had seen the prince up close and were convinced he had noticed them. "He looked right at me when he dismounted his horse," Bola bragged, twirling a strand of her beaded hair. "Nonsense," Chinyer interjected. "He smiled at me when I greeted him. You were standing too far back for him to notice you." Amina listened quietly from the corner, where she was grinding pepper. Her stepmother had given her a mountain of chores to complete as usual. She tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the prince. His kind eyes, his gentle smile, the way he had said her name, it all felt like a dream. Madame Ngozi's sharp voice broke her reverie. "Amina, stop daydreaming and finish your work. We need to prepare for tomorrow. The prince may visit again." "Yes, stepmother," Amina replied, lowering her head to hide her emotions. Meanwhile at the palace, Prince Emeka was deep in thought. His advisors and attendants surrounded him, discussing the day's events and the women he had met. But Emeka barely listened. His mind kept returning to the girl at the stream. There had been something genuine about her, something that stood out from the polished smiles and practiced curtsies of the other maidens. "Your Highness," his chief advisor said, breaking through his thoughts. "Have you made any decisions about the women you met today?" Emeka shook his head. "Not yet. I need more time." The advisor nodded, though he seemed slightly frustrated. "Very well, Your Highness. We will continue to visit other villages as planned." The prince nodded absent-mindedly, but his heart wasn't in it. He resolved to return to Ikede before leaving for the next village. He wanted to see Amina again, to learn more about her. The next morning, Amina was at the market, helping her stepmother sell vegetables. She worked diligently, arranging the produce and attending to customers. But the whispers and stares of the villagers made her uncomfortable. She caught snippets of conversations as she moved through the crowded stalls. "Did you hear? The prince was seen near the stream yesterday. Who was he talking to? No one seems to know. It couldn't have been anyone important. Probably just a servant fetching water." Amina's cheeks burned, and she kept her head down, hoping no one would connect her to the story. But deep down, a small part of her felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the prince would come back. Maybe he would remember her. By the time the sun began to set, Amina was exhausted. She returned home with Madame Ngozi and her stepsisters, carrying the unsold vegetables on her head. As she approached the compound, she heard a commotion. Villagers were gathering outside their gate, murmuring excitedly. "What is going on?" Madame Ngozi demanded, pushing through the crowd. Standing in the center of the crowd was Prince Emeka, his regal presence unmistakable. He turned toward Madame Ngozi and spoke with authority. "I have come to speak with Amina." Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Amina's heart stopped. Her stepmother's face twisted with shock and barely concealed anger. Bola and Chinyer exchanged looks of disbelief. "Amina?" Madame Ngozi repeated, her voice rising. What could the prince possibly want with her? Emeka's gaze was steady. "I would like to speak with her. Alone." The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Amina stepped forward hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. The villagers' eyes burned into her, some curious, others filled with disbelief. Madame Ngozi's face flushed with anger as she moved to block Amina's path. "Your Highness," Madame Ngozi began, forcing a smile. I'm afraid Amina is quite busy with her chores. Surely you'd prefer to speak to one of my other daughters, Bola or Chinyere. Emeka's expression didn't waver. Thank you, Madam Ngozi, but I wish to speak to Amina. Madam Ngozi hesitated, her smile faltering. She turned to Amina, her eyes flashing with warning. Go inside, Amina. Now. But before Amina could retreat, the prince spoke again, his voice firm yet kind. Amina, will you step out and speak with me? The villagers gasped in unison. This was no simple request. It was a direct order. Amina looked at her stepmother, then at the prince. She knew there would be consequences for disobeying Madame Ngozi, but the look in Prince Emeka's eyes gave her courage. Yes, my prince, she said softly, stepping forward. The crowd parted to let her through. Madame Ngozi glared at her, but Amina kept her gaze on the ground as she walked toward the prince. When she stood before him, he gestured for her to follow him to a quieter corner of the compound. I'm sorry for the scene, Emeka said once they were alone. I didn't mean to cause you any trouble. Amina shook her head. It's not your fault, my prince. I'm just surprised you would want to speak to me. Emeka smiled. Why wouldn't I? You seem kind, hardworking, and genuine. I don't meet many people like you. Amina's cheeks flushed. Thank you, my prince. I wanted to ask you something, Emeka continued, his tone serious. Would you consider attending a gathering at the palace tomorrow? I'd like to get to know you better. Amina's eyes widened. The palace? But I'm just a servant in my own home. I'm not like the other girls you've met. Exactly, Emeka said, his gaze steady. That's why I'm asking you. For a moment, Amina couldn't speak. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. What would her stepmother say? How would the villagers react? But beneath the fear, a tiny spark of hope began to grow. Perhaps this was her chance to break free from the life she had always known. If my stepmother allows it, I will come, she said finally. Emeka nodded. I will make sure she does. Until tomorrow, Amina. As he walked away, the crowd erupted into whispers. Amina turned to face Madame Ngozi, whose expression was thunderous. Bola and Chinyere stood behind her, their faces twisted with jealousy. You've embarrassed me, Madame Ngozi hissed as the villagers began to disperse. We'll talk about this later. Amina lowered her head and returned to her chores, but her heart felt lighter. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond her stepmother's shadow. The morning sun bathed the village of Ikede in a golden hue as Amina nervously prepared for her journey to the palace. Madame Ngozi, fuming but powerless against the prince's wishes, begrudgingly handed her an old wrapper to wear. It was plain and worn, a sharp contrast to the lavish outfits she had reserved for Bola and Chinyere. Don't embarrass me further, Madame Ngozi snapped as Amina adjusted the wrapper. Go, do whatever the prince wants, and don't forget your place. Amina nodded silently, too excited to let her stepmother's words dampen her spirits. She tied her scarf neatly, grabbed the basket she had prepared with fresh fruits as a gift, and began the walk to the palace. The villagers watched her with a mix of curiosity and envy. Whispers followed her every step. How did someone like Amina catch the prince's attention? She must have bewitched him. There's no other explanation. But Amina ignored them, her heart focused on what lay ahead. The palace gates loomed tall and majestic, guarded by soldiers in gleaming uniforms. As she approached, one of the guards stepped forward. Are you Amina? He asked, his tone formal. Yes, she replied, clutching her basket tightly. Follow me. The guard led her through the grand gates and into the palace grounds. Amina's breath caught as she took in the beauty around her, manicured gardens, fountains that sparkled in the sunlight, and towering walls adorned with intricate carvings. It was like stepping into another world. Prince Emeka awaited her in a shaded courtyard, dressed in a simple but elegant tunic. He smiled warmly as she approached. "Amina, I'm glad you came," he said, his voice as kind as she remembered. "Thank you for inviting me, my prince," she replied, bowing slightly. He gestured for her to sit on a cushioned bench beneath a flowering tree. "You don't have to be so formal. Today, I want to get to know you, the real you." Amina hesitated but eventually sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Emeka began asking her questions about her life, her family, and her dreams. At first, she answered, cautiously, unsure of how much to reveal. But as the conversation flowed, she found herself relaxing. She told him about her late parents, how her stepmother had taken her in but treated her as little more than a servant. She spoke of her love for weaving and how she often dreamed of one day selling her own fabrics in the market. Emeka listened intently, nodding and asking thoughtful questions. "You're incredibly resilient, Amina," he said after a while. "Most people in your position would have given up on their dreams, but you haven't." Her cheeks flushed at the compliment. "Thank you, my prince. But I don't feel resilient. I just keep going because I have no other choice." "That's exactly what makes you strong," he said, his gaze steady. "And it's why I believe you deserve more than the life you've been given." Amina's heart swelled with gratitude and a glimmer of hope. For the first time, she felt seen and valued for who she truly was. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Emeka rose to his feet. "Thank you for sharing your story with me, Amina. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. I have plans for you, but for now, let me escort you home." They walked back to the village together, the prince's presence drawing astonished stares from everyone they passed. When they reached her compound, he paused and turned to her. "I'll be back soon," he said. "Take care of yourself, Amina." As he walked away, Amina stood at the gate, her heart filled with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, she knew her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The news of Amina's visit to the palace spread like wildfire through Ikede. Every corner of the village buzzed with speculation. Some admired her for her sudden rise to prominence, while others, like Bola and Chinyere, burned with jealousy. Madame Ngozi's wrath was uncontainable. "How dare you bring such attention to this household?" she spat at Amina. "Do you think you're better than my daughters now?" Amina kept her head low, enduring the scolding in silence. Deep down, she held on to the memory of Prince Emeka's kind words. They were a shield against her stepmother's anger. The next day, a messenger from the palace arrived with an invitation for Amina to attend a royal feast. It was to be a grand event with nobles from across the kingdom. Madame Ngozi tried to argue, insisting that Amina wasn't fit for such an occasion, but the messenger's firm stance left no room for debate. With no fine clothes to wear, Amina worked tirelessly to weave a simple yet elegant fabric for herself. Her fingers moved deftly, pouring her hopes and dreams into every thread. By the time the feast approached, she had crafted a modest yet stunning outfit that reflected her resilience and creativity. At the feast, Amina felt out of place among the glittering gowns and elaborate jewelry of the nobles. But Prince Emeka's reassuring smile eased her nerves. He introduced her to the guests, speaking highly of her strength and character. For the first time, Amina felt like she belonged. But not everyone welcomed her warmly. Among the nobles was Lady Ugochi, a wealthy and influential woman who had long hoped to secure her daughter's marriage to the prince. She regarded Amina with disdain, determined to undermine her. During the feast, Lady Ugochi approached Amina with a saccharine smile. "You must feel so out of place here, dear. After all, this isn't your world." Amina met her gaze calmly. You're right. But I believe people can rise above where they come from. Lady Ugochi's smile faltered, and she walked away, defeated. Prince Emeka, who had overheard the exchange, was impressed by Amina's composure. As the evening progressed, Emeka stood to address the gathering. In my search for a future queen, I have met many women. But one stands out, not because of her wealth or status, but because of her heart, strength, and authenticity. The room fell silent as he turned to Amina. Amina, will you join me as my partner, not just in the palace, but in life? Gasps echoed through the hall. Amina's hands trembled as she rose to her feet. Yes, my prince. I will. The hall erupted in applause, though not all claps were genuine. Lady Ugochi and others glowered, but Amina didn't care. She had overcome countless trials to reach this moment. Back in Ikede, the villagers celebrated Amina's engagement. Even Madame Ngozi, though begrudgingly, acknowledged her triumph. Bola and Chinyere avoided her, unable to hide their envy. As Amina stood on the palace balcony, looking out at her new home, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her journey had been filled with challenges, but she had emerged stronger. With Prince Emeka by her side, she was ready to embrace the future and the adventures it held. The days leading up to Amina and Prince Emeka's wedding were filled with preparation and excitement. Villagers and nobles alike marveled at how a humble girl from Ikede had won the heart of the kingdom's prince. Amina, once overlooked and mistreated, now found herself at the center of a grand celebration. Madame Ngozi, though reluctant to admit it, began to treat Amina with more respect. Bola and Chinyere, however, sulked in the shadows, their jealousy preventing them from joining the festivities. Amina, ever kind, invited them to participate, hoping to bridge the rift. This is a happy time for all of us, she told them gently. Let us move forward together. The wedding day arrived, and the palace shone brightly with decorations of gold and green. Amina, dressed in a gown she had designed herself, walked down the aisle with her head held high. Her steps were steady, her heart full of joy. Prince Emeka waited for her at the altar, his gaze filled with pride and love. As they exchanged vows, the hall erupted in cheers. The villagers of Ikede, seated among the nobles, celebrated as though one of their own had risen to the stars. Amina's story had become a source of inspiration for all. After the ceremony, Prince Emeka addressed the crowd. Amina has taught me the value of humility, resilience, and love. Together, we will rule not with power, but with compassion and understanding. Amina's journey from the stream to the palace had been long and challenging, but it was also deeply rewarding. Moral lesson. This story teaches us that kindness, humility, and resilience can lead to great rewards. No matter how difficult life may seem, staying true to oneself and persevering through challenges can open doors to unimaginable opportunities. Amina's journey reminds us that true worth lies in character, not status or wealth. Thank you for watching the Stream of Destiny on our channel. If you enjoyed Amina's inspiring journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share this video to spread the message of resilience and kindness. Let us know in the comments, what did Amina's story teach you? See you in our next adventure.